eloquence. Hus told harfizers as a were no nade of 'em, now King's man his zell were come, a purpose vor to command us like. "And do you mean to say, you villains," cried Jeremy, scarce knowing whether to laugh or to swear, or what to do, "that your officers took their dismissal thus, and let you come on without them?" "What could 'em do?" asked the little man, with reason certainly on his side. "Hus zent 'em about their business, and they was glad enough to goo." "Well," said poor Jeremy, turning to me, "a pretty state of things, John. 60 cobblers, and farming men, plasterers, tailors, and kettles to mend, and not a man to keep order among them, except my blessed self, John. And I trow there is not one among them could hit all indoor flying. The Doones will make riddles of all of us." However, he had better hopes when the sons of Devon appeared, as they did in about an hour's time. Fine fellows, and eager to prove themselves. These had not discarded their officers, but marched in good obedience to them, and were quite prepared to fight the men of Somerset, if need be, in addition to the Doones. And there was scarcely a man among them that could have trounced 3 of the yellow men, and would have done it gladly too, in honour of the red facings. "Do you mean to suppose, Master Jeremy Stickles," said I, looking on with amazement, beholding also all our maidens at the upstairs windows wondering, "that we, my mother a widow woman, and I a young man of small estate, can keep and support all these precious fellows, both yellow ones and red ones, until they have taken the Doone Glen?" "God forbid it, my son," he replied, laying a finger upon his lip. "Nay, nay, I am not of the shabby order, when I have the strings of government. Kill your sheep at famine prices, and knead your bread at a figure expressing the rigours of last winter. Let Annie make out the bill every day, and I at night will double it. You may take my word for it, Master John, this spring harvest shall bring you in 3 times as much as last autumn's did. If they cheated you in town, my lad, you shall have your change in the country. Take thy bill, and write down quickly." However, this did not meet my views of what an honest man should do, and I went to consult my mother about it, as all the accounts would be made in her name. Dear mother thought that if the King paid only half again as much as other people would have to pay, it would be perhaps the proper thing, the half being due for loyalty, and here she quoted an ancient saying, "The King and his staff be a man and a half," which, according to her judgment, ruled beyond dispute the law of the present question. To argue with her after that, which she brought up with such triumph, would have been worse than useless. Therefore I just told Annie to make the bills at 1/3 below the current market prices, so that the upshot would be fair. She promised me honestly that she would, but with a twinkle in her bright blue eyes, which she must have caught from Tom Faggus. It always has appeared to me that stern and downright honesty upon money matters is a thing not understood of women, be they as good can be. The yellows and the reds together numbered 120 men, most of whom slept in our barns and stacks; and besides these we had 15 troopers of the regular army. You may suppose that all the country was turned upside down about it, and the folk who came to see them drill, by no means a needless exercise, were a greater plague than the soldiers. The officers, too, of the Devonshire hand were such a torment to us, that we almost wished their men had dismissed them, as the Somerset troop had done with theirs. For we could not keep them out of our house, being all young men of good family, and therefore not to be met with bars. And having now 3 lovely maidens (for even Lizzie might be called so, when she cared to please), mother and I were at wits' ends, on account of those blessed officers. I never got a wink of sleep, they came whistling under the window so, and directly I went out to chase them, there was nothing but a cat to see. Therefore all of us were right glad, except perhaps Farmer Snow, from whom we had bought some victuals at rare price, when Jeremy Stickles gave orders to march, and we began to try to do it. A good deal of boasting went overhead, as our men defiled along the lane, and the thick broad pattens of pennywort jutted out between the stones, ready to heal their bruises. The parish choir came part of the way, and the singing loft from Countisbury, and they kept our soldiers' spirits up with some of the most pugnacious psalms. Parson Bowden marched ahead, leading all our van and file, as against the Papists, and promising to go with us till we came to bullet distance. Therefore we marched bravely on, and children came to look at us. And I wondered where Uncle Reuben was, who ought to have led the culverins, whereof we had no less than 3, if Stickles could only have found him. And then I thought of little Ruth, and without any fault on my part, my heart went down within me. The culverins were laid on bark, and all our horses pulling them, and looking round every now and then, with their ears curved up like a squirreled nut, and their noses tossing anxiously, to know what sort of plough it was man had been pleased to put behind them, man, whose endless whims and wildness they could never understand, any more than they could satisfy. However, they pulled their very best, as all our horses always do, and the culverins went up the hill without smack of whip or swearing. It had been arranged, very justly no doubt, and quite in keeping with the spirit of the Constitution, but as it proved not too wisely, that either body of men should act in its own county only. So when we reached the top of the hill, the sons of Devon marched on, and across the track leading into Doonegate, so as to fetch round the western side, and attack with their culverin from the cliffs, whence the sentry had challenged me on the night of my passing the entrance. Meanwhile the yellow lads were to stay upon the eastern highland, whence Uncle Reuben and myself had reconnoitred so long ago, and whence I had leaped into the valley at the time of the great snowdrifts. And here they were not to show themselves, but keep their culverin in the woods, until their cousins of Devon appeared on the opposite parapet of the glen. The third culverin was entrusted to the 15 troopers, who, with 10 picked soldiers from either trained hand, making in all 35 men, were to assault the Doone gate itself, while the outlaws were placed between 2 fires from the eastern cliff and the western. And with this force went Jeremy Stickles, and with it went myself, as knowing more about the passage than any other stranger did. Therefore, if I have put it clearly, as I strive to do, you will see that the Doones must repulse at once 3 simultaneous attacks, from an army numbering in the whole 135 men, not including the Devonshire officers, 50 men on each side, I mean, and 35 at the head of the valley. The tactics of this grand campaign appeared to me so clever and beautifully ordered, that I commended Colonel Stickles, as everybody now called him, for his great ability and mastery of the art of war. He admitted that he deserved high praise, but said that he was not by any means equally certain of success, so large a proportion of his forces being only a raw militia, brave enough no doubt for anything, when they saw their way to it, but knowing little of gunnery, and wholly unused to be shot at. Whereas all the Doones were practised marksmen, being compelled, when lads, like the Balearic slingers, to strike down their meals before tasting them. And then Colonel Stickles asked me, whether I myself could stand fire. He knew that I was not a coward, but this was a different question. I told him that I had been shot at once or twice before, but nevertheless disliked it as much as almost anything. Upon that he said that I would do, for that when a man got over the first blush of diffidence, he soon began to look upon it as a puff of destiny. I wish I could only tell what happened in the battle of that day, especially as nearly all the people round these parts, who never saw gunfire in it, have gotten the tale so amiss, and some of them will even stand in front of my own hearth, and contradict me to the teeth, although at the time they were not born, nor their fathers put into breeches. But in truth I cannot tell, exactly, even the part in which I helped. How then can I be expected, time by time, to lay before you all the little ins and outs of places where I myself was not? Only I can contradict things which I know could not have been, and what I plainly saw should not be controverted in my own house. Now we